Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight. Big show for you tonight. We're going to have Steve Atwater coming up in the next segment. Also, Solomon Wilcots is going to join us from Pro Football Focus. But right now, Benjamin, I want to talk about the offensive side of the ball, more specifically about the running backs. You and I had a conversation on Broncos Country Tonight about how Phillip Lindsay reacted to the Melvin Gordon signing. And it's kind of interesting. In one hand, you say, well, this might be reduced touches for Phillip Lindsay. But on the other side of this, maybe this might be the best thing to happen to Phillip Lindsay's career. Not that he was getting complacent, but maybe he was coming into this thing kind of expecting to be the guy, expecting to maybe get a big paycheck. Instead, now he's going to be sharing touches with a former first-round pick. You kind of agreed with me on that idea, at least in principle.
Yeah, I think Phil is a guy that plays with a chip on his shoulder, and having that kind of motivation of another back brought in and maybe, I don't want to say given his money, but it kind of looks that way on the surface. I think that plays well for Phil. I think Phil's a guy who draws motivation from those things, similar to Aaron Rodgers. Every perceived slight, he stacks him up, puts him on his shoulder, decides he's going to plow through another linebacker with it. And, I think it's great. I think that Phil having that kind of motivation, having the ability to turn those kinds of things into motivation is great for him. You could go the other way. You could have a player that gets upset, holds out, grouses about it, demands to be traded. Phil's not like that. He said, you know what? Let's take this, let's use this, and let's get better.
Right, and one of the things he mentioned in that interview with Terrell Davis to having another running back in that room that is going to push me. And I think, whatever you ultimately want to say about Melvin Gordon and the contract, and I know, Ben, you've had your criticisms of it, but in the end, you come back to saying, well, Melvin Gordon definitely upgrades them, and I think ultimately he really will push Phillip Lindsay.
Who have they had in that running back room? Devontae Booker? I mean, they haven't had the kind of veteran leadership that they're going to get out of Melvin Gordon, the experience that he brings to the table. Phil had never had that, and now he's going to have that. And hopefully what we get is kind of an older brother scenario here, Older brother's fresh back from college, and now he's going to coach up his younger brother through high school and help him out. I'm hoping that's the kind of the scenario here. We get kind of that familial relationship, and Melvin Gordon takes his experience working with a Hall of Famer and Phil Rivers and all the offense and things that he'd been through and brings that to the Broncos. The Broncos are able to do more with it.
Courtland Sutton spoke with the media, and he talked a little bit about how Deshawn Hamilton and Tim Patrick shouldn't be viewed as down roster guys. That maybe is more of a media creation than what they're talking about in the wide receiver room. I think it's very easy for almost anybody, fans, media, anybody, to say, listen, you drafted Jerry Jeudy, you have KJ Hamler. There's only so many touches that eventually could go around in that room. But, Ben, what do you think about him saying that and basically kind of throwing in the adage of, hey, listen, we look at it as just more competition?
Well, that's the right thing to say. If you're Courtland Sutton, that's what you have to say at this point. Now, it is easy for us media guys to talk about down roster guys and things like that, and it looks that way on paper, but ultimately this thing has to play itself out. Football's a meritocracy, and those draft picks are going to have to earn those spots on the roster. Now, because they were drafted where they were, they're probably going to be given more chances to earn that, but you don't just dismiss Tim Patrick and Deshawn Hamilton out of hand. You put them out there and let the best players win, and if Deshawn suddenly comes alive and wins it, then so be it. Tim Patrick has been a money guy, a clutch guy on third down in the red zone for the Broncos over the last couple of years. That's gone overlooked. And, I would always hesitate if I'm a receiver, if I'm on a team, I would always hesitate to say about my teammates, well, they're down roster guys, because by speaking that into existence, you've now limited them to that, And
so I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, you don't ever want to do that. You want to say, hey, we're here for the competition. All these guys are going to go out, try the hardest, try their best. The best three guys are going to play, and we'll use everybody else where we can.
Right, and so that's exactly kind of where I wanted to go. So you talked about Tim Patrick and how he could carve out a role. What about Deshawn Hamilton? Is there a scenario where he can carve out a role in this offense with all these guys?
I think between the 20s as a slot guy, you could see something like that. In scenarios where you're third and short and you're not looking to go vertical, you don't want to put a KJ Hamler out there or put Jerry Jeudy out there. Maybe both those guys just had a big chunk play or something. You pull them off and put Deshawn on. If it were me in Pat Shurmer's offense, he would be the drag route guy. On the backside, you'd have the slant and the drag, and you would have Deshawn Hamilton coming across on the drag, and that's the third read. If your first guy's open, second guy's open, just dump it down to Deshawn, let him pick up a few. Give him an easy catch and create some confidence. So, maybe being in this offense helps reinvent Deshawn Hamilton.
Speaking of Pat Shurmer's offense, one of the things Courtland Sutton also mentioned was that this offense, this scheme really allows the wide receivers to go make plays. Now, I'll add a little bit onto that, saying I think almost every wide receiver would probably say that about his offensive coordinator in the scheme. But let's just for a moment, let's entertain this. What about Pat Shurmer's offense is set up so well for wide receivers?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a pablum quote in the same way that every defensive coordinator wants their defense to be more aggressive. I've never heard of a defensive coordinator. Well, we just like to be a lot more passive on defense this year. But as far as receivers making plays, it does. If there are vertical shots to be had in this offense, there are underneath routes that are run that allow the receiver to create with the ball in their hands. And there's a lot of the screen game, too, which means that the receiver is actually going to be creating on their own outside of the blocking. So, I think that in saying that, that's probably what he means. There are more ways for a wide receiver to create in this offense than perhaps there were in Rich Scangarello and that kind of West Coast variant that they were running.
We definitely saw opportunities, especially with the Vikings. Holy cow, you can have multiple wide receivers be successful in this offense, can't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you go back and look at Shurmur's history, there are opportunities for wide receivers everywhere. Whether you're the primary guy, whether you're the backside guy, whether you soft spot the zone guy, whether you're the tight end, whatever you are, there are opportunities to be had, and it's what you make of them. So, I think guys like Noah Fant and guys like Courtland Sutton are really going to appreciate that, and we'll see what these other guys can become.